And it's a great joy to introduce Jessica Rasmussen, who's a real ally and friend and a backer of where we're going now. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, Dan. Lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, a real pleasure. I think the essence of this is that sustainability in financial management can create good businesses and businesses for good. And I think one of the issues around carbon was that it was seen as a very good way of making a very big buck back in the day, and it went wrong for a lot of people. I personally made a mistake of taking on a lot of venture capital that didn't end up in a good place for me personally. But I'm thinking about how ethical investment works really well and how we are working well together.
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute pleasure when we were introduced. Interestingly, via I think it was the UK Business Angels Association, which we became a member of early in 2020, and it was one of the gentlemen there, I think, that introduced us and said, Marie and I, who had started on our journey of sustainable investing and investing under the banner of Two Magnolias, he was very keen that we met because, as far as he was concerned, you were the absolute essence of sustainability, and with your history and your knowledge of the market, that we should meet, and we were absolutely delighted to do that. It's a very difficult discussion when we come to sort of what is the right way of financing when it comes to sustainability and all things, if you like, carbon related, because now the way in which the world is moving and the impact that this industry is having, but also hand in hand with the fact that this is not just a sort of nice to have. This is an absolute necessity. We, as a global population, have to manage our carbon budget extremely well and carefully. So there is a real, I think, as you say, there's a sort of balance that has to be struck between, how do you make the best possible return, but also how do you absolutely do the right thing. And I think that balance now is becoming very important, and it's coming to the forefront, particularly in the finance industry, of the way in which business should be conducted going forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I think from what I remember, there's sort of like ethical investment, and there's philanthropy, and then there's venture, and then there's vulture, and then there's hardcore.
Yes.
And I think the way some venture funds run themselves is a bit like a record company. They back 10 projects, 5 are going to fail, maybe one's going to do incredibly well, one will do okay. And so it's an old paradigm of a bit dog eat dog. And I think it came out of the tradition of the banking community, and it's very male dominated. And I think the female essence of Two Magnolias, and the fact that you regard financial services as a service to the people that you're backing, which is what where I understand this totally different relationship that I now have with the financial resource. And I think what's really important about climate and carbon, and we're all in this together, and it's so ethical investment that's placed in order to get good businesses to do good is far better way of investing than the fiduciary duty only dog eat dog, like let's get the company with the sharpest elbows and the hardest core team to go on a sprint to float. I'm really appreciating this new dynamic of your new mechanism for having your ethical views on how to help people, especially diverse people and people who wouldn't normally get funded.
Yeah, I mean, both Marie and I come from financial services. We both grew up in that environment. We understand it. We benefited from it. And, there is no part of us that believes that, financial services won't actually be ultimately the driver for good, over the next 20 or 30 years. And But you're right. I don't know how many reminders we need for those of us in the finance industry, whether it was the global financial crisis, whether it was the last epidemic. There have been, whether it was the Greek debt financial crisis. I mean, there have been so many reminders of crises that have evolved, not because necessarily it's all the banker's fault, or the fault of companies receiving the finance, but it's sort of I get the impression that we've always sat on separate sides of the table.
Yeah.
And now, given what's happened over the last 18 months, and given what is going to happen and has been flagged by scientists, commentators, experts such as yourselves, all over the world, whether it's the World Economic Forum, whether it's United Nations, there is something very, very important that we all have to do to ensure that we protect the planet for future generations. And so therefore, we all need to sit on the same side of the table. And what's quite interesting is that I think financial services and people who sit within them are now embracing the speed and the acceleration of change. I mean, for example, in fact, Mark Carney made a very good point. He did a speech, I think, last year or a couple of years ago, where he was saying that governments are coming together and are now saying, for example, sort of petrol and diesel emission cars in their current state will no longer be tolerated within the United Kingdom and within the European Union from 2030. No sort of pure petrol and cars will be sold, and so obviously those industries will have to change to accommodate consumers going forward. But who is actually going to drive that change, and who is going to accelerate that change? The finance community and financial services, they're not going to wait till 2030 to change their behaviours. Behaviours will change now because the finance industry has to accommodate this change as well. And I think it's all about capital, and it's all about filling those equity gaps. And we choose to sit. I mean, there are so many different approaches for the financial industry. There's the very large global mega banks who'll be financing very large global companies. We choose to sit in the space where the entrepreneurs and the creative thinkers are really coming up with new solutions, who are going to solve these problems. And that's the part of the food chain where we want to close that equity gap.
And that's what I really appreciate it's also the art side of what we're doing, and the entertainment and the way that we engage with people. I think that's really come across. But I think the key point here is that we are on the verge of the next industrial revolution. I mean, we absolutely are going towards a sustainable technology place where we retool the whole of the world's systems, which are all wearing out, and they have to be new, and we have to make them sustainable. And having, as you say, investment from people like yourselves into organizations like my organization, where we're all on the same side of the fence, and actually we have the same view and we're aligned, creates an atmosphere of opportunity where we can do this. For example, people, the consumer, have gone from denial to despair. And there's a tremendous amount of climate anxiety, especially around young people, young females, thinking of families. And if you can get back into the mindset of people, that there are solutions out there, and there's a suite of activities. There's no single golden bullet, but within this next revolution that we're going into, there'll be rewilding, there'll be afforestation, reforestation, natural regeneration, which is obviously my thing that I'm specifically interested in. But also, when buildings wear out, people tend to put new versions of old equipment in them. If they put new versions of new services in them, you can get gigatons of reductions on a global basis just by changing mindset. You've got political, industrial, supply chain management. There's a whole suite of activity But the nature-based solutions is what's, I think, most interesting. I mean, I admittedly, I had a terrible time on my route to where we are now, but I looked at my old company's website and to see that there was that they're saying that the work I started is protected, I think they say, planted and protected, I think is the words, over 3.3 million hectares. And looking back to when I first planted a tree in Castle Kerry in 1988 and how the whole voluntary carbon market evolved, that's great for going forward.
Yes, I absolutely, 100% agree with you. And I think, you touched on a couple of things there that I'd like to pick up on. One is the fact that there is social anxiety. And there's social anxiety amongst young people. So I'm a mother of 2 Gen Z boys. Marie is a mother of 2 Gen Alpha boys. And, we are acutely aware of sort of the expectation of future generations, and these are the 2 generations that we know, as yet are unable to determine their futures themselves. I mean, they're still in school, they're still studying, they're still, but they are educated and they are connected and they understand what's happening. And so we know that, yes, we have started, a sort of investment fund, and yes, we're focused on returns, but we are focused also on solutions for generations to come. And this is the change that's happening, I think, especially on sort of in financial services, that we have, that we are realizing that there is a humanity that we have to bring to the table, because, we have to absolutely make sure that we protect their futures. And if we protect their futures, then, their outcome will be good for all. And so we're not just doing it for us, we're doing it for the future.
Well, I think that's a really key point. And when you've got like Japan saying it's going carbon neutral, and the EU putting $1 trillion of it, the president of the EU just announced that, and the UK, there's obviously a trend going on. Some of the biggest funds that are all shifting into renewable divestment in oil is happening at scale. But I think this whole thing, and I think wrapping up now in our relationship, is with this call, that if you just go into the wonder of our relationship, is that investing as a financial service whereby we are able to come up with simple solutions, such as the music initiative that we're involved with my live show and the app, and how that engages people, which we'll talk about in more detail later.